Welcome to Korea, and you're watching The New Koreans. Recently, I was invited to a book club discussion on my book, Who I Am, a Memoir of an American Korean in Search of Identity. Now, this is a story about how I struggled to find my identity, caught in between two cultures, particularly in America and Korea. So if this is something that you're going through or something you're curious about, then check out the video, but also check out my book as well. I'll leave the links in the description below. This is something that I have been struggling with my entire life. And it's the whole idea of who am I, like this matter of identity from a kid. And so when a couple years ago, when I started, before I went on a sabbatical, I was on a sabbatical a couple years ago, that's when I took a lot of time to write this book. One of the questions that was on my mind, I looked at our congregation, the people at church, and I realized Jubilee Church has changed a lot over the years. When I first got here almost like 19 years ago, it was almost predominantly, I wouldn't even say expat, I would say more like American or Korean American, right? And then over the years, that changed to American, Korean American to more international. But when I look at our church congregation now, I see a lot of Korean people, who have lived or studied or spent some time abroad. I see a lot of people who seem like me, who seem on the outside very American, but they have a Korean passport. Whether they want to be here or not, they're here, and they've got to figure out how to do life here. And so when I saw that, a lot of it resonated with me because I know that I went through a lot of those struggles. And so in the midst of seeing everyone else go through these things, whether they share it out loud or not, I know that they're going through it because I've gone through it. And so one of the things, even at age, I'm 51 now. When I wrote this book, I was 49. But when I was writing, I was going through an identity crisis myself, because I kept on thinking to myself, I know this sounds a little bit extreme, but at 50, in Korea, at the age of 50, a lot of salarymen in Korea who've been working at their jobs for a long time, they lose their jobs and they got to figure out what they're going to do with their life. And that thought crossed my mind and I worried, what am I going to do? And it dawned on me, oh man, I'm not really Korean outside of the English speaking context that I'm in. What am I going to do? And it terrified me, actually. And so in order for me to find peace with myself, I'm like, I got to revisit my entire life to know who I am, but also know who I am in Christ. See, the answer about your identity is found in Christ is an important answer, but it's not the only answer. It's a very limited answer because everyone can say, I am who I am in Christ, which is important. But what about all the other things about your life? All your personal experiences, where you were born, your parents, your education, where you've lived, all that kind of stuff, it matters. But a lot of times we're kind of like, we blame those things for disadvantaging us, saying, it's because of things like that that I am where I am today, darn it, right? But I thought to myself, no, I've got to re-examine all of that to really know who I am. And I've got to look at my life all over again from the lens of society, from the lens of history, from the lens of culture. And so when I started doing that, it just started coming together from even before I was born to my childhood to when I lived in the United States to Korea, coming back to Korea after college, all that kind of stuff. And then, even up to just a few years ago. And it's really a rediscovering of myself throughout the lens of history, my own personal history, culture and societal history, all of that, while at the same time reconciling all of that with myself. And as I reconcile it with myself, the other thing I came to realize was a lot of the experiences that I'm going through or that I had gone through, I went through a lot of that like 10, 15, 20 years ago, coming back to Korea, where I know that a lot of people are going through that now today. The times may be different, but the experiences is still the same. And so my hope was that as I share these struggles, as I share my story, if other people who are struggling through the same thing read the story, hopefully not to give them an answer for their lives, but at least allow them to have a perspective where they can look back on their lives and try to understand themselves as well. So longer than an elevator pitch. Was that?
It's quite a long elevator.
Yeah, it's a very long. We're going up Lotte Tower right now. From my childhood, I was definitely into a lot of fantasy related stuff. I still remember my third grade teacher in the United States in New Jersey. She was the one who introduced me to like things like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And so I was into a lot of like fantasy, sci-fi, stuff like that as a kid. Then when we moved back to Korea, I didn't have access to a lot of the books that I wanted to read. And so I know it may sound a little bit silly, but when I became an adult in my 20s, and I would go to like Gyobo bookstore to look for English books, because even though I grew up in Korea in middle school, high school, Korean was still very difficult for me. So I looked for English books to read. And I would go there looking for a lot of the classics because I felt like I missed out on my like youth of reading a lot of classic books. And so I would look for a lot of the classic books. And so even to this day, perhaps some of my favorite books, the titles, are J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye. Books about like growing up, like discovering yourself, finding yourself. Even back then, Lord of the Flies was another one of those things where I really love that. Sorry?
You're not kidding when you did that.
Yeah. So those are but it's also like stories about growing up and discovering yourself. Like even like back then, probably, perhaps I was like curious about identity. So Lord of the Flies, Catcher in the Rye. Another one of my famous favorite was one that I know you guys read recently, The Alchemist.
Oh, The Alchemist was good.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorites as well. So I would say if you were to ask me three of my favorite books, those would be the three favorites, that just off the top of my head, right?
Catcher in the Rye, Alchemist, and
Lord of the Flies. Yeah.
Yeah.
To Kill a Mockingbird is another one of those. So those are some of my favorites growing up. But people don't read anymore. But books still, I still believe, more than like podcasts and all that kind of stuff, books still contain a lot of wonderful information, a lot of stuff that you can't get on like YouTube or podcasts and all that, or shorts, right? Yeah. And I mean, even my kids, I try to get them not to watch YouTube shorts. Like I understand that shorts is the way that's the attention span of people today. Reels and shorts, TikTok. Yeah. And so I keep on telling my kids, don't watch YouTube. Not because I don't want them to watch YouTube. If there's like good content they can watch on YouTube, I'm all for it. But when they get on YouTube, it's because they want to watch shorts. And the shorts that they watch, it's not only like decreasing their attention span, it's feeding them garbage. It's like, because it's instantaneous, like, what is it? Like fantastic, exaggerated, widely exaggerated, like rubbish.
Yeah.
Like the attention span of the human being right now who is on social media is 30 seconds, if even that.
I think that's generous.
Yeah, that's if even that. Yeah.
What is that?
So everyone is looking for their identity. Everyone wants to find their identity. I've preached this. I preached actually several sermons on this as well. But the world tells you that your identity is not what other people tell you; it's what you define for yourself. And to that, I'm like, I appreciate that sentiment. I appreciate that because people are really struggling with it. And part of it is you do need to know yourself. But true identity is never formed by yourself. It can't be. True identity, real identity is always given to you by somebody else. You can claim your identity by having this idea of, okay, what are all the different elements that come together in who I am today, and trying to reconcile that. Well, you can't claim something that's not there. And so identity is always given to you, whether it's given to you by God, it's given to you by your parents, it's given to you by society, it's given to you by just like your genetics of how you were born. It's always given to you. In that, though, what our task is we have to see all these different elements and how these different elements play into the formation of how I see myself, and not be dissatisfied with it, but to understand it, to know that I am unique, I am gifted, I am a child of God, but at the same time, I am a unique child of God with different experiences. I look different. I have gone through like all these different things, and so that and like an accumulation of all of that is what helps define who we are. But none of that is something that you can like absolutely claim, this is me, man, because it's all related to everything else, like our relationships and society. It's all related. It can't be not related.
They're saying in some
Um, yeah, yeah, you can't. I mean, there's part of it where you have to make a decision. I'm not going to become a victim of the circumstances of my life. It is a choice. It is a choice. But some people are so like, because everyone has all these different elements of their lives. But the thing is, some people, they choose to be a victim of all the different elements of their lives. And say, it's because of these things that I am who I am today. Or you can be, it's because of all of these things that I am who I am today. It's different. There is a choice that we have to make in that, but we can't define all the elements of who we are, because those are things that are sometimes outside of our control. Because we can look at all the cards that have been dealt to us, and we could be like, oh man, my life sucks, man. Or, but see, I think that's what people do. They see themselves in a vacuum in such a way. The whole exercise that I tried to do was to get outside of my own personal vacuum and say my life sucks. And I'm not saying like even before, like as a pastor, it's kind of weird for people to think, wait, pastor, are you saying that before you went on your sabbatical, you're saying that your life sucked? I'm not saying that, but I am saying that there are parts of it. It's like, yeah, I do think it is. I think there's like things that are unfair. You know,
Isn't that how everybody thinks?
It's how everybody thinks. But what I'm trying to do is, yeah, everybody thinks that way. But what I'm trying to show you, or what I'm trying to do with my book is, yeah, we can take that perspective, or we can take another look at things and look at all the events of our lives, everything, the day and times that we live in, and see that we are a product of that, and it doesn't suck. There is meaning, there's purpose for that, all of that. And that's why I took the time to kind of reflect on the entirety of my life. I don't know what's going to happen to me in the future. Like even this morning, I was thinking to myself, man, what would happen in 5, 10 years? I don't know. I had a conversation with my wife just the other day. Like, if you stop being a pastor at Jubilee Church, what are you going to do? My in-laws, they run a 고등어 mackerel restaurant in Jecheon. It's like if you got nothing to do, you can go work there. And I thought to myself, do I want to do that? I probably don't want to, but if I have to, I will. And that would be the next stage of the forming of my identity. Because our identity should never be static, and it never will be static. It's always dynamic. It's always changing. It's always evolving. And we need to keep learning it from that. Yeah. But I do know that everyone struggles with it. Everyone struggles with it to a certain degree. That's why, like, even in my book, at the preface of my book, I mentioned that this is not meant to be a self-help book. I'm not trying to tell you these are the answers for your life, because I can't tell you these are the answers for your life. What I can do is I can share episodes from my life and how I'm dealing with the struggle of my own personal identity. And hopefully, as you see me going through these things, you can learn something about yourself.
Right.
But this is definitely not, I definitely do not claim that I have the answers for that because I don't.
Sure. I guess how did you resolve this tension, the cultural aspect?
Oh, I didn't.
Didn't. You're still struggling with it.
Oh,
Like,
I share in my story, right, in my book, that as a little kid, I hated the fact that I was not white. I resented that I was Korean.
Yeah.
I resented my parents. I hated the way that I looked.
First came to Korea, you were like kicking and screaming in the pain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then when I came to Korea, everyone was Korean. I didn't fit in there either. I didn't fit in here either. And so I resented the fact that I looked different because I did look a little bit different. Um, and then, and so I didn't. And then I think even for the longest time, I'll be honest with you, even now, it's not just a matter of American or Korean. It's because I call myself an American Korean instead of a Korean American.
Yeah.
There's a difference in that because, like, even at our church, we have a lot of Korean Americans, and in many ways, I relate with them. In some ways, I don't, and in some ways, I feel like they don't get me because we have different experiences, we have different realities, right? Like people say, "Oh, so are you going to be here in Korea forever?" There's an assumption behind that question that you're American. You have a choice to go back. I don't have a choice to just pick up and leave and go back to America. This is where I'm at. Although culturally, I'm also very American and I struggle to fit in. But this is the place of not only my birth, this is where I live, this is where my family is at. This is where most likely I will die, right? And so when people ask me that question, they don't understand that they're asking me, I guess, a faulty question. And so even in that, have I fully reconciled with it? I'm still learning to reconcile with it. I'm not Korean American. I am American Korean. Different. I actually did a Google search on that because as I was writing this, because I don't consider myself Korean American. People say that I'm Korean American. I don't consider myself Korean American. So I did a Google search, American Korean, and you can't find it in Google because as soon as you do American Korean, it'll say give you results for Korean American, right?
Oh, you made a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. But I was very intentional about saying American Korean because I'm very Americanized. I guess technically it's more Americanized Korean is what should be more technically correct, right? But they call it Korean American, so I'm going to flip it. I'm going to call it American Korean. It's an old book. It's a really old book by a pastor named Charles Swindoll, and it's called The Grace Awakening. And that was when I was still not really a Christian. I thought I was a Christian. I was like borderline Christian.
What age was it?
I want to say, this is like back in college.
Okay, so long time ago.
A long time ago, right? And it's still a classic book. But it was the first book that opened my eyes to the concept of grace, unconditional grace, right? And that when I read that, that meant so much to me to understand grace. And so one of the books that recently that I kind of enjoyed, which was a non-Christian book by a blatantly atheist writer, Yuval Harari, and he wrote a book a few years ago called Nexus.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
And it's about how throughout history communication, like how communication was spread, if you will, like how people communicated in civilization and society, and trying to understand that, because what that does, it shows us how communication works today. If you look back at the history of communication, one of the things that I do as a pastor, whether it's in small capacities or larger capacities, is to understand and learn to communicate. But it's not just a matter of the means of communication. Like, is it like speaking? Is it podcast? Is it YouTube? Is it like books? That's part of it. But also understanding the psychology behind communication as well. Like, what are some of the different social elements that are influencing the way that people not only think, but choose to listen to certain things, right? So I found that to be a very interesting book, something that I felt was useful, beneficial. There are parts in that book that he speaks out blatantly against Christianity in a negative way. Yeah, no, I do, because I appreciate that opinion. I don't want to be just like, oh, dude, the guy is hating on Christianity,
Right.
so I think I should hate on him too. It's like,
Yeah.
what is this opinion? Where is it coming from? What can I learn from that as
Right.
well? You know, so yeah, I actually really enjoyed that book. I know that I'm not a professional writer, but I know that I am a storyteller. And so I didn't want to be who I wasn't. So even in my writing style, I just want to write how I speak. So that if you know me and you're reading this, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's how Joe sounds like. Like Joe's talking to me, you know what I mean? And so in that, I think more than anything, I just want to be true to who I am, my voice, because if it's going to be my work, it's got to sound like me.
Yeah. I would say while I was reading it, it sounded like I was.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well done.
Yeah. This was a story, I mean, because it's my life story. So it's a story that has been kind of brewing and kind of baking for a long, 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 long time. And so when, like, even in the preface of my book, I said, when I started to write, I was surprised how easy it was, because I already knew in my mind, and this is probably just me processing my own life and my own identity for many years now and questioning myself, what are the different things, the aspects of my life that have like defined who I am today. And so because of that process, it was already just kind of, it had been brewing, it had been baking inside me. So once I started like pull my computer out, it just started coming together. Now my wife kind of wonders how I remember a lot of these things, but for me, even some of the most like, it seems like the most minute, like needless stories, it's not in there because I just think it's funny. It's in there because I remember it. And the reason I remember it is because somehow it impacted me. It influenced who I am today. And that's why it stuck with me. I mean, there's no way I can remember all 49 years of my life, every detail of it. But what's in there, and there are things I left out as well, because I'm like, okay, this is not really necessary to the story, to the storytelling, the narrative. But everything in there is because it impacted who I am today. Like in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I could just tell the story, but I still am a pastor. And so I still need to bring God into it. Maybe not too much in a preaching way, but at least God did play different aspects of my life all throughout. And so I need to bring that in. And then, but as I was doing that, I will say that parts of it, I kind of, perhaps, even as my friend mentioned, was a little bit too preachy in some of the chapters. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't want this to be, I think my story can be beneficial to Christians and non-Christians alike. And if it's too Christianese, then I know there's a lot of Christianese in there. But if it's too Christianese, then it'll completely throw people off. And I'm like, okay, I got to cut a lot of this stuff out. And so without compromising who Christ is, I want it to be a little bit more like savvy, if you will. So my intention was not to become the next Charles Dickens and have like wonderful, like long, like wonderful poetic paragraphs. That was not, I wanted to have fun stories that when you read one sentence, you're like, huh, you know? Yes. Yeah, there are a few times in there, I can't remember exactly. I was like, I wrote that? Wow.